I just made a video for the stupidest things of 2024, and within like the first week or two, we've already got contenders for the stupidest things of 2025. Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire just gave a review for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and it is stinky. If you don't know, he's one of these Daily Wire hosts. The Daily Wire is a big conservative podcast, radio, news show, like Ben Shapiro, you've probably heard, is one of the figures. Now, I'm not really political, so I'm not going to talk about them much because I don't care. But this has gone too far. I don't care about your views on the economy or war or whatever, but he just attacked Sonic the Hedgehog. That's too far. That's what Matt Walsh's review has done, so let's get right into this.
When a man becomes a father, he's called upon to make sacrifices for his family. And often these will be small sacrifices. Sometimes they'll be larger, though, more significant.
Oh no, not this Sigma red pill shit about what a real man is. Yeah, if you're not bathing in wet concrete, you must be a liberal sissy. For the next 30 seconds, he gives some detailed explanation about how some men rush into burning buildings and some take their kids to watch Sonic the Hedgehog 3. One of those is braver than the other, and it's Sonic 3, as if the movie is even that bad. For reference, it's become the highest rated video game movie. It has an A cinema score, fans loved it, critics loved it, over 80% critic score, over 90% audience score. I thought it was the best movie of 2024, but let's see Matt's reasoning.
Or whatever. Or most harrowing of all, he may be compelled by his paternal obligations to go to a movie theater and watch Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Now, a man in that situation would, of course, much prefer to be engulfed in flames or hit by a speeding train, but that would be the coward's way out.
Yeah, not funny. I'm gonna skip through a minute where he talks about what he and his family did over Christmas break because no one cares. I get that you're trying to draw the 10-minute mark for ad revenue, but let's just skip the foreplay.
Now, before I offer my brief review of this thing that I hesitate to call a film, I must first acknowledge, in all fairness, I never saw Sonic the Hedgehog 1 or Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It's possible that one cannot fully appreciate the narrative complexities of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 without having seen the first two chapters in this epic Hedgehog saga. Maybe the other two movies are works of staggering artistic genius that would elevate the third installment and lend it the sort of context necessary for me to have appreciated it.
Yes, exactly. You're not going to understand any of the character dynamics since you didn't watch the first two movies. You're not going to know any of the relationships between Sonic and Knuckles, Robotnik and Agent Stone. Or if you haven't played the games, you're not going to know much about Shadow and Maria or how Gerald fits in. Of course, if I was suddenly thrown into a sequel for a movie that I haven't seen, I'm probably not going to know shit. If I watched Infinity War without any of the films that came before it, I'd be like, who the hell are these guys and why do I care?
I mean, this is the kind of movie where Jim Carrey plays two characters. One is the evil villain and the other is the evil villain's evil grandfather in old age makeup. And the two break into an impromptu dance routine that makes no narrative sense but lasts approximately 87 minutes. It's the kind of movie where those same characters before the dance routine actually look directly into the camera and explain that they're being played by the same actor.
I actually do admit that there was too much Eggman shenanigans with Jim Carrey in the film, but it really wasn't that bad. Conservative commentator watching two men merely interact on the screen for 1 microsecond impossible challenge. There's Walkin', my cereal. Also, he fails to point out anything actually wrong with the Gerald Robotnik and Eggman giving that fourth wall break of being played by the same actor. I thought it was pretty fun.
I'm not going to bother explaining the plot of this film in any detail. I wasn't tracking it that closely, to be honest. I was mostly fighting to stay awake.
Okay, so he literally just self-reported that he wasn't paying attention to the film, too busy on Grindr. But if you're telling me that you're not going to talk about the plot because you don't remember it enough because you weren't paying attention, then why the fuck am I watching your review? This whole video honestly just sounds like his kids wanted to watch Sonic 3, so he went along and took him. He didn't like it because it's a movie for children and Sonic fans, neither which he's a part of. And so he was disgruntled about having to get off his ass and go do it, so much so that he's got to make a video about it.
As for the plot, I can only tell you that Sonic is the good hedgehog, which you may know. There's also an evil hedgehog voiced by Keanu Reeves.
Sonic the Hedgehog good and Shadow the bad hedgehog. Bro didn't even watch a single minute of this movie. They literally explained that Shadow was a scientific experiment in a lab who watched his best friend get killed and was sealed away by the military. He breaks out and wants revenge, as does Eggman's grandpa who created Shadow and was the grandfather of his best friend who died, and he helped him escape. You have to be a fucking moron if you can't understand something that simple. They literally lay it out for you. This isn't something like you have to play, you know, 6 games and string together the timeline through whatever. This is literally in your face. I'm not gonna play the next minute or so, but he does make a small point about how Keanu Reeves got cast as the voice actor just for being A-list, and how that happens a lot in animated works. And to be fair, that does happen sometimes, but everybody agrees that Keanu did great. He was very much fit for this role, and he did a fantastic job.
So Sonic has to stop the evil hedgehog and his evil cohorts, that's the Jim Carrey dancing duo I mentioned earlier, from blowing up the world with a big laser. And, you know, this has been the evil plan of every evil villain in every blockbuster franchise film for the past 3 decades. It's a formula that this movie is not interested in deviating from. This is not the sort of movie that deviates from formulas.
I don't even know what his point is here. Like, the bad guys doing bad things is overdone. Then go watch something like The Boys, which you would probably also hate because walk. Also, the plot for this movie comes from a video game which is literally from the early 2000s, but whatever. If you thought this narrative was way too cliche, I'd like to see you come up with something experimental and better.
Now, if you're wondering why the evil hedgehog and the 2 Jim Carreys want to explode the world and murder 8 billion people in a cosmic blast that they will also die in, it's because the older Jim Carrey's granddaughter, I think, was killed, and now he wants to commit murder-suicide because life isn't worth living. Like, that's real. That's in the movie.
Yeah, it's almost as if he's a science experiment who has trouble controlling his anger, with a character arc to overcome that, while the other is a mad scientist who is also imprisoned for years.
Now, if that seems like weirdly bleak and dark for a kids movie where the characters bust out impromptu dance routines and randomly break the fourth wall and constantly speak in internet lingo from 2019, there's a lot of that, by the way. Just as one example, at one point, Jim Carrey says, "Damn you, autocorrect." If it seems weirdly bleak and dark for that kind of movie, it's because it is.
This is the stupidest fucking thing to hear from Matt Walsh. If you're a conservative, I'm going to assume that your opinion on most modern media is that it's too safe and stale these days due to constraints and censorship. Again, not to be political, but conservatives used to be like, when we were kids, we were watching fucking slasher movies. We were out in the bed of a pickup truck and ate rusty nails. Swam in the creek, whatever. Now the woke liberal mob wants to take that away. And now conservatives are such pussies. Like, oh, this movie's too dark. Oh, my children cannot watch it. There's a gay character. Society's collapsing. Oh, Shadow the Hedgehog, is it promoting family values? Like, not all conservatives are like that now, but those who've become that are the SJW feminazis that they used to hate. Shadow the Hedgehog has a gun and a motorcycle. They made a joke about women in the military, am I right? By all accounts, somebody like Matt Walsh should have appreciated this. This movie was anything but safe or stale.
This is a movie, like so many kids' movies these days, that schizophrenically darts back and forth from being ironic to painfully self-serious to goofy to earnest, and so on and so on. It doesn't try to smooth over these tonal transitions with good writing or performances. The writing is just terrible, and the performances are atrocious across the board.
These are blanket statements with no real reasons given behind them. He's acting like because it tells a serious story, the film can't have humor or tell jokes. Any attempt to mix the two must be forced and bullet points that Hollywood has to hit. I'm skipping more nonsense rambling because he just says movie bad over and over again, but I want to focus on Matt himself for a moment because I've played these games before. I know who he is. I've seen his work. I went and saw his movie Am I Racist in the theater, a movie that Matt Walsh made, and I thought it was good. He demonstrates, or rather lets his subjects demonstrate, how some of these social justice movements fan the flames of racial tensions in the US, even though they aim to do the opposite. The film was hilarious and made some thought-provoking points. What I'm trying to say is that I know that there's a brain in his head somewhere. He has some level of intelligence and awareness. I don't know why he's not using it, or why he's using it to hate on a movie that he barely watched, but given the like-to-dislike ratio, it doesn't seem to be working well for him.
You might respond that, well, this movie isn't for me. It's for kids. Well, first of all, tell that to the other people in the theater with us. I can tell you that my kids were by far the youngest people in attendance. There were multiple groups of adults, just adults, no kids, whole groups of them who bought tickets to Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Also, tell it to the multiple grown adults who got angry at me on Twitter for not liking the movie. The funny thing is that a lot of those same people say, well, it's not for you, it's for kids. Why are you getting so upset about it then? Why are you tearfully defending a movie that you claim is not for you either?
This fraction of a point is moot because none of the adults in the audience there agree with you. Literally nobody agrees with you. Critics, general audiences, and Sonic fans all enjoyed it. And if you're the odd man out with the hot take, I'd rather you have an actual explanation on why, other than this movie's bad because it's bad. Notice how there's also no nuance in the way that he says anything here. Sonic the Hedgehog is a video game franchise marketed towards children that has been relatively popular since the 90s. Obviously, it's accumulated fans who have now aged, but it continues to be children's media. If it were to become adult and age with the audience, the art, style, comedy, and various things that make Sonic Sonic would cease to exist. Sonic the Hedgehog is a popular enough franchise to keep adults in the fanbase while constantly drawing in new crowds of kids, because the adults don't need it to be adult, especially since, even though the humor appeals to kids, the emotional depth is for all ages. Most of us can admire it after getting past the few corny jokes that are not made for us because other qualities of the film are. Like the story that you didn't pay attention to because your mind was probably made up before you saw it, that all movies nowadays suck, and that you're frustrated that you had to go do something for your kids instead of yourself.
They act like it's ridiculous to expect the content produced for kids to be high quality or to have any artistic merit whatsoever. But I tend to think exactly the opposite. I think content produced for kids should especially be high quality and should especially have artistic merit, which is why I hated Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and why it is today, I must say, sadly, canceled.
Looks like what's really canceled is you, bitch. I blew by a bunch of rambling with him saying, oh, not all kids' movies are bad. I actually watched a different one the other night that was good. And he made some half-baked points about how humor targeted just for children has no value or whatever. I don't really care. It sucks that despite Matt Walsh possessing a small modicum of intelligence, he uses it to make the stupidest, most uninformed movie review I've ever seen. Alright, laters.